So what I'm going to talk about during this, I'm not going to do like an intro to vsynth like this is what everything is, this is what everything does. I kind of want to just jump right into my two favorite things to do with any sort of video synthesis system, which is figure out interesting ways to do modulation and figure out fun things to do with feedback. So this is sort of, I'm going to see if I can build up to this tonight. I probably don't have enough time because I'm only going to do this until 9 p.m. my time, so for 1 hour, but we'll see how far we get. But we'll start out, I think I'm going to delete most of this wacky stuff. And then let's just start out with this one simple, let me delete this connection. Here we go. Let's just start out with a radial waveform generator. The way you'd load this up is you go over in this side. Not sure if this happens to everyone, but it definitely happens for me. When you first load up the new patch, you go into the launcher and you hit new patch and you pop in over here. You might have to go Control E, Command E, select this, and Control Duplicate, make a new one in order to get one that'll work properly. I don't know if that's just a glitch on my end, but that's pretty much a reliable glitch on my end. Once you have this, if you want to pull up a radial waveform generator, and you go over on this area, and you select Waveform Generator. You see there's a bunch of different WFGs, that stands for Waveform Generator. And you grab a Radial Waveform Generator. And you see with this one, you have the controls of time. So I'm keeping things in edit mode because I'm going to be doing a lot of editing. And when you're in edit mode and you want to play around with this stuff, you hold down Command or Control and then click on things and move them around. So what you can do is you can mess around with the frequency. So these are video oscillators. So video oscillators have 3 arguments. Amplitude is sort of fixed on these, but you can control time, which is how many frames it takes for something to change, and frequency, which is how many cycles per frame you have. And then if you click on this thing here, you can do like different rates of frequencies. Different, I think it's, you do this one, it goes from, what do you call it, from 0 to 1. You click over here and, I guess it's the same thing. I'm not sure what this does. Thought that was a rate changer. I guess I'm wrong. And if you click on something, usually if you double click on something, it'll set it to default. But yeah, so I'm going to take 2 radial waveform generators here and show you how to make some ripples happen. So the way that you do sort of cross-modulation things in this is you've got these little inlets at the top. And you can see we've got 2 inlets here. These are these little like, you move your mouse over them, they turn into little circles. This one says FM in, Control in. And this one says PWM, Control M. So PWM is pulse width modulation, and that's only going to make a difference if we're on the pulse thing. You can see if I'm selected this thing, pulse width and pulse width modulation don't pop up. Over here, then you can select pulse width. That's only if you've got a pulse wave selected. Let's just start with the sine wave for now. And I would like to modulate the frequency. So I'm going to take this other radial waveform generator. If you want to get another one, you can pull it out of this little thing here. Or you can just click on this and then Command or Control D, and that'll duplicate it. And then grab another one. And I'm going to take the output of this. I'm going to plug it into FM in, Control in. And then I go over to this one says FM in, and we do PM, so I'm not, oh yeah, for sure. Let me see what I can do here. Hello, hello, is this better? Awesome. Okie dokie. So I'm back over here. So it says FM control in, and I'm controlling the PM here. I'm not quite sure what's the difference happening there. Kevin is here, so they might be able to help out with things, but I don't think they want to go out of their way to do too much. And I'd like to stress some things, like, generally speaking, like, there's a lot of things that, like, there's a lot of details that you don't necessarily need to, like, know when you're doing this sort of stuff. Like, a lot of times you can just, like, mess around with things and, like, see what happens, and whether or not, well, this one says FMN, but there's only PM control, and it looks like it's, where did that come from? Huh? But it looks like this is PM on this, right? Not FM? But it's not really that important. What I'm trying to say is, it kind of doesn't matter at this stage what the difference between PM and FM is. What I'm just trying to say is, this is how we use one waveform generator to modulate another waveform generator. You see, let me show you the output of this one. So you grab this little thing here, hit a duplicate, pull this out over here, and then we should be able to... Yeah, that's what I thought. It looks like phase modulation. So, and this one says phase modulation, so I was going to trust that. And for whatever reason, I'm not getting something to pop out there. Huh. I guess not. What if I... There we go. So we can look over here and we see how the white areas of this one correspond to increasing or decreasing amounts of the pulse, the frequency over here. And this is because it's doing an additive offset in the phase. The phase meaning the angle as how many times per frame you have a repetition of the cycle. You can use this, and then you can see if we have this switched off, then it's just very static. Every single one of these cycles is the same width, and as we turn this up, we change this a bunch. And if you were at my Hydro workshop on Monday, then you would have mentioned something about making sure that your that the rates of these things are not sort of the same or like offset slightly. So if I set this to 0.25 and this one to 0.2, you can see that the cycling is not as repetitive as it was before. If I set them both to the same cycle, then it'll basically like, it'll even though it's like modulating, it's modulating in sort of the same way because they're synced up. Whereas if I take this one and I just set it up to like 0.3, then because they are co-prime modulation amounts, then they will cycle less often. And for me, having things not be as repetitive is sort of like key to video synthesis, interesting things. So this is really just like one little step of the stage here though. If I then take the output of this one, plug it into PM over here, and whoa, I had PM totally cranked up to begin with. And then we start to get some more chaotic things happening. So you can see I'm doing a signal feedback loop where this one's feeding into the same thing on this one, is feeding into the same thing on this one. If I have them both cranked up, it's going to be very noisy. There are patterns happening, but we can't really make out the patterns very well. You can try just like attenuating these a little bit less, but then it's not quite so striking. You can try some different wave shapes. Down here, you'll see that there's, I'm trying to make this so it's a little bit easier to see everything. Sort of the The difficult thing about doing a lot of signal feedback in this sort of environment is things get really, really messy really quickly with the, the cables and everything. But yeah, if I try this one doing that and that, and it's like a little less messy, but it's also like not doing as much crazy feedback stuff. So if I would like to see more details in the feedback, I've got this little block over here. We've got a high-pass filter and a low-pass filter. And we can use these to sort of smooth out the signal as it goes back and forth in the feedback loop, and we'll get some really interesting patterns out of that. Where you'll find the filters is over here in processors. You can select, you see we've got VCA, we've got feedback, we've got LPF 2x, LPF 4x, and HPF 4x. So you'll want to grab LPF 2x and an HPF 4x. And then what I'm going to do is delete this cable, and then we'll send this in here, and then we'll grab, let me turn these both, keep doing that thing. Wow. Turn these both up so you won't see what's happening until I start to play with it, and then we'll take this back into here. And then let's see what happens once I start to play around with this high-pass filter. Alright, now we are talking. So you can see right off the bat we've got some reaction diffusion patterns happening on the edges here, where there's like a boundary between the bright and the dark. And if you know what a high-pass filter means in video processing, this should make a lot of sense. A high-pass filter is basically, it figures out, so a high-pass filter in audio brings out the high frequencies. So like if there was a high-pass filter on my voice, you might not hear a bunch of it because my voice is sort of higher pitched and you would lose the higher frequencies. But when you're talking about a two-dimensional image, because the high-pass filter only works per frame, so it's working on a two-dimensional image, the high frequencies in a two-dimensional image are the basically like the very like abrupt like boundaries between things. So where something is really bright and really dark right next to that, the high-pass filter is working on that. And that's what it's basically like, you know, when you like attenuate things with the filter, this is kind of what it is attenuating. So as you move this up and down, you can see sort of like different things happening. If you turn the high-pass filter all the way down, you just get this kind of strobing thing happening. And then as we bring it back up, you can see there's some aliasing kind of going on around the edges here. And then when we find that sweet spot right about here, is where you get the reaction diffusion patterns kind of happening. Let me know if this is making sense, if this is helping at all. Feedback is definitely appreciated. And then I also put this low-pass filter in there because you can see once we start using these two in tandem, we can get a lot of really crazy things. So just the high-pass filter on its own gives you a lot of patterns, but they're kind of strobing and jittery. And then we take this low-pass filter and we can kind of smooth things out a little bit more. And then I kind of want to slow everything down so we can see what's happening a bit more. So if I keep this one, we keep this one at 0.25 and bring this one down to like 0.625. Let's try a couple of different wave shapes on each of them. And we can see, yeah, we get a bit more defined patterns happening here. Change this one to a spiral. That's pretty fucking dank. If I change this one to a pulse, change the pulse width, and you can see how we can do some pretty nifty things if we grabbed another thing as a pulse width modulation source in here. And you know what? Why don't we? Let's grab in something and use this to modulate the pulse width on this one. So if I want to modulate the pulse width, I'm going to need to grab another generator. Let's try Waveform Generator number 3. And then I'd like to monitor the output. So I'm going to duplicate this, pull this over here, and nope, we can't monitor that output. We can only use this one. You can see Waveform Generator 3 is doing this sort of vertical, is that vertical? Horizontal, vertical? I always get those two confused. Vertical stripes. You can change the angle of the stripes, which is pretty neat. And then you can change the speed and the frequency and the shape. So it's got like a dynamic wave shaping on it. You can see it goes from a saw to a pulse. Let's kind of keep this right about here. This is like a triangle, give or take. And let's use this to modulate the pulse width. So if I turn up pulse width modulation on here, you can see that as this moves, it's making these different patterns sort of come in and out in different ways. We sort of change the speed here. Kind of want to see if we can do like some parallaxy kind of things happening here. Trade this pulse width down a bunch. Well, that's kind of neat. Mess around with the low pass filter. Here we go. Here we're getting these like fun things crawling across the screen here. That's pretty awesome. This VCA over here, I'm going to use this in a minute. I'm definitely going to use this edges. I want to make sure, I want to keep this up because I want to definitely remind myself to use the edges in a feedback loop before this ends up. But yeah, so this little chunk here of a high pass filter and a low pass filter, I use these all over the place when I'm doing signal feedback, and I'm going to try to set this up doing the same way back in over here. There we go. And you notice when you use these two together, there's like sweet spots that you find where each of them sort of like match up well in one another. Let's try some different wave shapes here, just to see how they play with this setup. Oh, that one's pretty cool. Try a different wave shape over here. Whoa. So then I went over and I turned this pulse width all the way down, and pulse width modulation is all the way up, so we're getting a little bit of a different effect happening here. Turn this frequency down some more so we can maybe get some more patterns coming out here. And here we go. We can really see the sort of detailed like reaction diffusion things happening that are as a result of the signal feedback and using these high pass filters. Word, thank you. Yeah, there's not really a lot of other, this is sort of one of my favorite things about vsynth, is this exact kind of setup right here, is being able to get really lost in like fine-tuning this kind of signal-based feedback, and then we can use this with some of the more traditional like frame buffer-based feedback in a bit, but I want to just sort of get this sort of basic thing set up. And then we've got this waveform generator over here, and you know, I don't like to leave anybody out of the feedback loop. So, see, this one's going into here, and the output's coming out over here, into here. So, let's grab this VCA, grab the output of this, bring it into the input of the VCA, and let's bring this into, so we can do frequency modulation, we can do phase modulation, and we can do pulse width modulation on this. Does anybody have a preference on which one of these I should try? Frequency modulation it is. Let's go into frequency modulation, go down to FM and crank this up a bit. And you can see down here that we're getting the feedback from this is offsetting the frequency of this. Turn the frequency way up, and then we can kind of see a lot more things happening in there. The VCA also allows you to do AM, which is amplitude modulation. In order to do amplitude modulation with this, we're going to need to grab another waveform generator. So, let's see what we got in here. We can do, let's just grab a waveform generator 2 for now. And right about here is, well, I mean, like probably like 10 minutes ago was when it started to get really confusing as far as like what the signal path is. But it's about to get even messier. So let me grab this waveform generator, and we can kind of already see what's going on in here. So let's monitor this and send this in as amplitude modulation. So you can see what this one's doing. Let's change this maybe that way, maybe that way, yeah. And let's turn up the amplitude modulation of this, and we can kind of start to see, as I turn up the frequency, then we can see the high frequency FM that's happening on the modulation source, the pulse width modulation source into here, which is coming into here, filtered, and then doing phase modulation on this one, just coming down through here. And then I don't like to leave anybody out of the feedback loop, so let's grab, let's see, so in there. Let's just grab the output of this and bring it on into phase modulation. And there we go. And let's try some different angles. Play around with the speed for a second. And set this one up to that. Alright. I'm just going to try a couple different wave shapes on all of these just to see how they play with this new setup. Interesting. Yeah. Alright, so I made this patch. Kevin is the one who made vsynth. I have nothing to do with actually making the environment for this, but Kevin's here, so you can say hi to them as well. So there's a little bit of kind of like stroby things happening. So I want to show you how to smooth things out when we're doing feedback things. It's pretty easy when you're doing feedback to get into very strobing things happening. And this is very, very low strobing in the grand scheme of doing feedback. But we can sort of get some more if we turn the filters all the way off, I think. But wait, no, I shouldn't go out of my way to make this strobe. That is unpleasant for people. But if we want to kind of smooth things out, so the way that you get this, so Max MSP, you can use this for free without a license. You just can't save anything. So if you look up Max MSP online and download that, you basically download a trial version which you can use with saving for like a month, and then that'll expire and you just can't save anything. You can see I'm running this on an unauthorized version, so it'll run without authorization. You can use this for Windows as well. I do not think there is currently a Linux build for Max MSP, but supposedly it is coming soon. Yeah, the way you get this is you grab Max MSP, and then once you are running it, you open up File, Show Package Manager, we get this package manager over here, and we'd search for vsynth. And you see vsynth by Kevin Cripper, and you just click on this, and you'd say install over here, and you install it, and then you launch it, and then you can basically, like, you'll see this little launcher, and if you just hit new patch, you can just start goofing around with that. That's what I did here. Or you can grab through all of these lessons and this patch book. But yeah, so if I want to do some sort of like smoothing, like time-based filtering, I can go over to, where is that? Processors, Temporal Filter. Let me just put this right at the end of the chain. Corner pins is where it goes out. Let me go here, to here, to here. And then we're going to use this to blend with the previous frame. So if I turn this all the way up, it's just going to freeze. This is just static video feedback. And as I turn it down, it goes back to the normal thing. Yeah. Ooh, that's pretty good. And then let me turn this pulse width a little bit down. So I just changed this radial waveform to a square wave. And you know what? We could actually grab one more thing to modulate. Let's grab... Let me make another VCA over here. Then let's take the output from this VCA. Let's grab this over here into there. Turn up the amplitude modulation. Turn up the bias. And let's pull this into PWM of this first one. Let's see what that does. I'm going to start to make things really ridiculous. Oh, that does nothing. There we go. So I just wanted to add some asymmetricality to this whole thing, because when things get way too symmetrical, then we're just like in straight up mandala land, and you can start to get a little bit too hypnotized. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do, so we're at 8:30, so I'm making good time here. I am going to show you how to do the more typical frame buffer based video feedback stuff in this. And also, this is a quick advertisement for next Wednesday. I'll be doing another one of these courses, same place. That will be in Video Waves, which is Video Waves is a open source software I've designed. You can use it for OS X, Windows, Linux. It is mildly more complicated to get set up than this, but yeah, it's just mildly more complicated to get set up. It's probably easier to get set up if you register on my website, andrejcreativecoding.com. Check out the nonlinear classes, and then I'll send an email out that has instructions on how to get everything set up. But what Video Waves is long story short, it's just all about frame buffer-based feedback. And frame buffer feedback is also something you can do over here in vsynth, and I'm going to start getting into that right now. So let's go into mixers. Let me grab... I try not to do the advertisements for like the shit that I actually sell here, because that seems like a little off topic. But yeah, I sell things too. If you look at my website, you'll see stuff that I build and sell. The CV thing is way off topic, but that's going to be pretty nifty. If I go into mixers and grab... Oh wait, it's not in mixers. Where did that? Luma Key. So I go into color, and I go into Luma Key. And you know what? I would like to get a little bit of color happening here before I start doing the feedback. So let me go into color as well, and grab a colorizer, put it right here. So a colorizer is going to do exactly what you expect. You got a little color picker here, and you can select a color. And, of course, that's not enough for me. I would like to modulate the color as well. I'm going to make myself some space over here because it's going to start to get even messier. So I'm going to grab another let me grab a shapes waveform generator. So the shapes waveform generator is oscillating shapes. Let me pull this one over here so we can see the output. And you can see it starts out as just doing this gradient square. I'm pretty happy with this gradient square. I want to slow it down though. I like to do things slowly. And let me go back up to color here. And I'm going to grab Hue Modulator. Yeah, I'll just grab this Hue Modulator. Get rid of that. Pull that in here. And let's grab the output of this into the Hue Modulator. And I'm going to turn up HM. So now you see the output of this is going to change the hue as it goes into here. Of course, that's not enough for me. I would like to also grab, here, we only have one output coming out of here. Grab this one, pull this into the shapes waveform generator, and do some PM with it. There we go. When I'm doing hue, I sort of like to use something a little bit more similar to the waveform that we're playing with, so that there we go. So I'm grabbing this radial waveform generator into the PM here, and you can see how there's like elements of the same shape being modulated into here. So when I'm doing hue modulation, when these really ridiculously complicated patches here, I don't want to use the exact same radial waveform generator output here to modulate the hue, but I do want to use this one, which is modulating the hue a lot. So you can see how it sort of it's holding some of the structure and emphasizing some of the shape that's coming through this, if that makes sense. Yeah, and then we can look at how some different shapes look. It's always a good idea just to like step back and just like hit some of these different buttons while you're playing around here, just to see what sort of different things happen. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with this. I've got this Luma Key over here. So we'll keep the temporal filter at the end of the chain. I'm going to grab another colorizer here while I've got this one out. Or no, I'm not. I'm going to duplicate this Hue Modulator, pull this over here, and I'm going to take the output of the Hue Modulator, I'm going to put it into the input of the Luma Key, and let's delete this, pull this one over here. And then what I'm going to do, oh yeah, what else I'm going to need? So there are two pretty crucial things to doing the frame buffer feedback. Is you want to be able to change the color space somehow, and that's why I grabbed this Hue Modulator. You also want to be able to change the XYZ space. So I'm going to grab a displacement number 2. So I'm going to have this displacement 2 and this Hue Modulator over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the output of the Luma Key, feed that in here. Oy, oy, oy. There's not going to be any good way to do this. I need like... I mean, what can you do with any video synthesis? You can siphon this into things. You can just take it as an output. You could project it. You can do whatever you do with anything, I guess. I'm not totally positive I understand the question. Let's grab this displacement, put it in the Hue Modulator, and we'll key it in with itself. So you can see, I'm not doing any of the modulation. Nothing's changing here, so we've just got the most boring kind of video feedback possible. It's not boring. It's pretty, but it's very static. But if we just go and change the hue a little bit, and modulate that, there's not even like any sort of like modulation coming in there. And then we get some rainbow vomit zones. If I change the zoom a bit, then we get that really classic thing. Ooh. And of course, the reason I grabbed displacement number 2 is that we can use a, hey, come on, go back to 0. We can use one of these to modulate the displacement here. So, this is getting pretty nuts. I don't know if I can add another waveform generator in here without my computer sweating too hard. Let's see if I grab this one and add this to zoom modulation. Let's see what that does. So displacement 2 has basically 2 different menus here. Initial point just sort of offsets the initial place you start with. And if you go to displacement depth, then you can see it's taking the output from this and using that to displace Z. And that's where it's going to start to get pretty dang bonkers. Alright, so I'm actually getting pretty close to where I wanted to get on this thing today. So that's working out pretty well. So you notice we had some hue modulation where it was doing that crazy unicorn vomit for a moment where it was rainbow zones everywhere. But we lost that. That's because there's nothing really changing the hue. So we need to actually do like an offset of the hue, and then we get this crazy unicorn vomit. And the more we change it, the more you see it'll just kind of turn into noise. Because this is natively working in RGB space, not in HSV space. So when you do things like amplify hue way too much and the amplification of the feedback loop, it goes way too fast for to actually get processed back into RGB. What happens is it just sort of like blanks out, everything clamps out, and it just kind of turns into this like off-white thing. This is pretty standard. You'll see the same thing will happen in Hydra, the same thing will happen in video waves, and I think the same thing will happen in any kind of digital zone where you like do like HSV high frequency like manipulations. So you notice I said it's like high frequency, even though this is just like an additive offset. It's not exactly high frequency, but what it is it's because of the feedback loop happening. So because this sort of video processing section here is happening in a feedback loop, this is probably running like 30 or 60 times per second. Like any little tiny thing you do here in the feedback loop is going to happen 30 or 60 times per second. So if I just take the hue and offset it by, by like the tiniest amount, you can hit shift while you're moving these things to do really fine-tuned stuff. You see, even if I offset the hue by like, I can't really even get it a tiny amount because there's something wrong with my mouse, but yeah, just set the hue off by 2. We're still going to get this crazy rainbow stuff happening. And let me just grab the output of this one. Should I grab the output of this one? Let me grab the output of this one and pull this into the Hue Modulator here. Whoa! That was a little too much maybe, but I'm pretty cool with it. And then now that we have, oops, I don't need to do that. Now that we have this going, we can play around with the threshold of the Luma Key. And then smooth will do like, looks like it's doing linear interpolation or alpha blending between the two channels. So this is like the difference between hard and soft key, essentially. It's still a pretty smooth. Oh yeah, so File, Show Package Manager, and then let me close out of this one. Show Package Manager, search vsynth, and that's about all there is. Oh yeah, and then if I turn up and down the temporal filter in here, we can start to bring out some of these ridiculous patterns a bit more strongly. Alright, so I'm almost exactly where I planned on being. And so once you've got like a feedback loop like this set up, let's just ignore all of these waveform generators for now. I'm not going to do anything else with these. Let's pull them out of the way. All I really care about is this feedback loop happening. So the feedback loop sort of begins right here. It's going through the Hue Modulator. That's not what I wanted to do. So, or no, output is going into the displacement, which is being modulated. Ooh. And then the hue is being, the Z is being modulated, and then the hue is being modulated. Let me try to do one more thing. So once you have a loop like this, I highly recommend just literally going through like the list of processors here, trying all of these processors in this loop. I definitely don't have time to do that today. But yeah, if I get a chance to do more of these, I would definitely enjoy it. Oh yeah, if this is helpful for y'all and you have income coming in, it's very helpful if you can donate for this sort of thing. Really, not very many people need to like throw me like a couple of bucks for this to like be worth my time. I mean, I don't like to like quantify things in terms of like money as being worth my time, but it's just sort of also like, shit, yo, I gotta like pay rent and eat food. So there's only so much time I can spend on doing things that don't do that, and sometimes it gets a little stressful. But yeah, I would definitely like to do these kind of things more often, and if y'all can like get together and get me like $20 for this session, like total, that is like enough for me to like do another one. So yeah, that's my donation spiel. Yeah, so we go in, grab this edges right here, and input here, output here, and gets pretty crazy right off the bat. So edges has two modes. Oh no, I wasn't saying that at all. I was curious if you needed to do more with it than just I wanted you to elaborate more on the question, because I wasn't sure if you wanted to like do more sorts of like modular processing with this, or use it with analog things, or what would be the end goal exactly. But yeah, you can. There's a bunch of different ways to grab this, like Kevin said. So thanks for helping out, Kevin. All right, so we have this edges thing happening in here. We might not be able to see the edges quite so strongly because of all of the modulation we're doing on this. If I go back in here and take this to 0. You see, this is what the edges is doing. So an edge detection works very similar to how a high-pass filter works. It actually pretty much, an edge detector is a high-pass filter, except you don't really, like, you detect all the edges. Thanks for making this, Kevin. This is awesome. So an edge detection is a high-pass filter, but it just doesn't, it works the same way as a high-pass filter in that it looks around for these sort of, like, big, drastic, high-low brightness shifts in the image. But the difference between that and a high-pass filter and image processing is that a high-pass filter looks at all the edges and just pulls all the edges out, and then you add it together with the original image so you get a sharper image. Whereas an edge detection just grabs the edges out, says, I don't care about the original image, all I care about is edges. So then you get this sort of thing. And then if I start to play around with the different values of this, we start to get some really hypnotic things happening. And you might not be able to see the patterns too much at first, but if you turn the temporal filter up, then we'll start to bring some things out. Let me turn the Z modulation app back up a bit more, and there we go. Oh, jeez. Alright, so here's some nonsense. And awesome. I got more or less where I was planning to go with 10 minutes to spare. So now is the time to start asking some questions. And I'm just going to start goofing around with this thing that I have set up and try some variations on it. Thanks. I want to see if I can bring out these sort of patterns that are happening in here. So the smoothing is doing some blending. So if I turn the smoothing off, then it's just this pretty much straight up like color, the chroma clamping happening. And then if I go back up to smoothing, then it blends things a bit more. If I go smooth too much, then like nothing really shows up. Ah, the output window. So, do you have the launcher up? Let me see. So if I go into new patch from launcher, I think what should happen is, here, I can walk this through you. I'm going to have to get rid of this whole patch, so say farewell to this patch. I can't save. And let me quit this. Here. You go. Show package manager. No sweat. I can't really show you how to grab how to find the window from that zone, so. Then let's launch it. So when I launch it, the output window and the vsynth launcher come up right here. And then I will click on, let's just look over here and I'll pull up a lesson, first steps. And as soon as I pull up a lesson, then I need to click on the lesson to have this thing sort of be actively showing like what's going on in the vsynthy thing. Otherwise, it'll just sort of like show, it'll sit right here and it'll say vsynth and it'll just be black otherwise. And if I want to start playing around with my own patch, I need to open this up. And see if I have this one open. Let me make this obviously different over here. If I have this one open, and if I have this one open, it's kind of only going to like latch to one at a time. Okay, dope. Well, I lost that patch. See, should I do a speed test and see how fast I can get into something crazy before 9 p.m. shows up? If anybody has any questions, now is an excellent time. Does anybody think they'll be stopping by for the video waves thing next week? Oh yeah, another thing, a reminder, if you're having trouble with this little thing here, make sure to duplicate, delete the original, and then you'll have something that'll work better. All right. Feedback speed test. What noise do we have? You know, I've never really played with this white noise before. Kind of curious. Oh, that was the wrong button. What do you look like? Wow, that's really fast. Next week will be about video waves, but just the software thing. Yeah, the Eurorack thing is pretty crazy. I actually hired somebody to take care of that because I'm really bad at actually putting together anything physical, it turns out. It was taking me months to build this thing with like surface mount things on it, and I found somebody who was actually pretty great at embedded systems design and A to D and D to A stuff. And they basically worked with me to design the CV interface, and it was amazing. And they've done great work. But yeah, next week will just be about video waves on the computer. It's kind of hard to do the wave pool. It's hard to do the wave pool and those kind of things on here, I think. I tried one and nobody showed up, so I figured it was just not worth it. But how do I make this noise? Let me make this really coarse noise. I change this. There we go. That's kind of smooth. What happens if I feed this in there? Anything? Alright, so I've got Waveform Generator, and some noise. I'm going to grab a VCA. Use this noise for amplitude modulation on the VCA. I'm going to grab my... Oh, word. No sweat. This combo. So, grab, let's see, in here. Let's try the different order this time. I'm not sure if I did HP and LP before, but definitely try both combos of this. They'll be slightly different. And let me do phase modulation both times on these. So, actually, let's show what it looks like before the feedback happens. So you can see that phase modulation is a bit different than frequency modulation. I'm going to smooth this out some. This thing over here. Grab into here, out into here, and then do PM over here, FM over here, and see what that does. Oh, it's not doing very much at all. There we go. I had to turn up the frequency some. Ooh, okay, that's getting cooler. You can see that the phase modulation is a bit more static than frequency modulation. There we go. And then let's grab one more thing to phase modulate both of these. And try to organize things. Alright, 4 minutes left. Any more questions? There we go. Let's keep all of these as signs. And while we're at it, I'm going to take the output over here, phase modulate this one, and the output over here, phase modulate this one. Woo! And then I can grab the output here, FM this one a tiny bit, and the output here and FM this one a tiny bit. Wow, this is way too fast. And you can see on these two, I'm not doing HPF, LPF thing, but I can. So, oh wait, I don't need to do it for that one. That was good. That one was just fine. What I want to do is put this on the FM. So that's where it's getting super noisy. Another one. Another one. So now you can see more of what I was saying before about video or the signal feedback being really stroby and stuff. And it's only partially because I'm feeding it this strobing noise signal. I mean, yeah, I can't really like argue with that approach to anything. If you understand audio synthesis, then I feel like it's very intuitive to go from audio synthesis to video synthesis. There's basically like the extra dimensions are gonna like be a little bit like wonky at first, but it's I don't know. It's just like extra dimensions in terms of like space and color, but those are like there's extra dimensions in audio in terms of just like you think about things in frequency versus just waveforms. But if you look on the launcher over here, there's there's like a whole lesson book right here that is very, very helpful for like getting advice and whatnot on how to like dig into things. And I'm pretty sure Kevin is doing some more of these workshops as well, and they'll actually be able to like tell you how vsynth works and not just like speed run through some like bonkers ass nonsense like I do. So you could always check one of those out too. All right, we're at 9 o'clock. I got somewhere pretty decent. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Donate if you can. If not, don't sweat it, yo. We'll all get by. Yeah, and then stop by next week for Video Waves. I do recommend registering for that one on my site because it is like, I don't know, it takes maybe like 10-15 minutes to get Video Waves set up, so it'll be helpful for you to do that before the class begins. Alright, cool. Thanks a bunch, and have fun. We'll just do some OBS feedback before we end. Easiest way to do video feedback. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for stopping by.